Welcome to the latest webinar in our Engineerica Education Keynote series. We are very pleased to be bringing you this complimentary presentation. For those of you who are new to us, Engineerica is a software company specializing in academic center management systems for higher education. You might be familiar with some of our software applications such as Academia and AccuCampus, and I want to give a special welcome, of course, to any Engineerica clients who are joining us today. And for those of you who are not yet clients, I do want to just quickly let you know we are offering a complimentary trial of one of our most popular center management systems, Academia. This gives you the opportunity to use it for an entire semester, risk-free, to see if it helps make management of your center and data collection easier. And if you're interested, you can send me an email. It's listed right there, rachelc@engineerica.com. We started this keynote series for our clients and our contacts who wanted to learn more about best practices and trends in higher education. Each month, we feature a distinguished speaker to talk about hot topics in the academic support field, and we will be sending out an announcement when we begin promotion for our next webinar, so keep an eye out on your email and our social media channels for that. I also wanted to let you know about our live conference that we organize near our company's headquarters in Orlando, Florida, which we are going to be hosting many presentations like this one, along with software training for clients. This is going to be our third time hosting the conference. It's always a lot of fun. So we are currently working on our plans for February 7th through 9th, 2027, so just over a year away. So mark your calendars, and again, keep an eye on those emails because we will be announcing more details soon. A quick introduction to myself. I am Rachel Cook. I'm a client success manager with Engineerica. I was previously a learning center manager for 6 years. So like all of you, I am very passionate about higher education and student success. I also have with me on the Engineerica side, Nick Armstrong, who is one of our technical support specialists. He's here as my backup and also to help with any technical issues that may come up. And with all that said, I am pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Very excited. Michael Frizell is the Director of Student Learning Services at Missouri State University. Since 2012, he has been the editor of the Learning Assistance Review, the peer-reviewed journal of the International College Learning Center Association, and has edited the book Learning Centers in the 21st Century. He is also on the editorial team for RiLADE and serves as Vice Chair of the Council of Learning and Developmental Education Associations. In addition, he is an ICLCA certified learning center professional, a level 4 lifetime, and a 2024 CLADEA Fellow. He has written almost 200 comic books based on famous people for TidalWave Comics. That is just a abridged version of his awesome CV, and I am very lucky that I've gotten to work with Michael several times over the years, and thank him so much for doing this presentation for us today. And now I am going to hand control over to him.
Thanks, Rachel. Every time I hear a list like that, I don't know about you guys, I have really strong feelings about that type of thing. I just feel like sometimes I have a bad imposter syndrome. And that imposter syndrome just really does haunt me in many ways. And even when I start talking about leadership and change like this, I think about that often. And change, I just want to point out first, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the country. My office is rather dark right now, and the reason it's dark is, well, sadly, it's dark because my dean of the library has put sensors in all the offices, and my screen is too big and it blocks it, so I plunge into darkness. So you get to see me kind of in the dark, looking tired. But
Oh, you
anyway,
look great.
oh, good, okay. So what was I saying? Really, when we talk about the leadership and coping with change in higher education, we all know that change is something we can't really prepare for. It's always part of what we do. It's the environment we're working in now. I am in a state right now that is likely to undergo severe cuts in higher education. Many of you are facing that same problem. So the question has never been for me, is change happening or not? It's whether I'm leading it or reacting to it. Learning centers tend to be highly reactive anyway, right? We take a look at the DFW rates and we try to predict which classes students will need us most. We look at our learning centers and say, okay, if they cut this budget, I have to protect the math center or the science center or my writing center because those are the most used, or some of you might say supplemental instruction or structured learning assistance. I'm guarding those with my life because that's where we get the biggest bang for our buck. Whatever that is, I started to try to think about how I was leading my space. And I wanted to explore with you today how I believe your center can be a laboratory for learning innovation on campus. And so when I think about change leadership, there's a lot of ways that you can look at it. We all know that change is inevitable, and that leadership determines whether we thrive or just survive in that environment. And over the years, working as a Learning Center director, I've been 26 years at Missouri State. I started out as a faculty member in reading and then took over a struggling writing center, and from there built the learning center at Missouri State called the Bear Claw Center for Learning and Writing. But I didn't do it alone. I had a partner in the space that helped me build the basic tutoring structures within that space. My administrative assistant has been wonderful to make sure that we've got the things we need and keep the center running. She's probably the one who does the most work, I think, when it comes to running that. But our students are what I rely on at Missouri State. We have a university of 26,000, and I have a small army of graduate assistants that become leadership in our space. And part of that, really, that innovation that we're trying to think about is how do I get our internal leadership to understand that when we navigate these problems, we're navigating a resistance. We need to learn how to communicate a vision. And then we need to build a culture that actually adapts as change occurs. I really didn't want to talk a lot about theory for theory's sake, but I'm going to explore some theory today. I really wanted to think about what your space looks like and how we react to it. There's so many stories that we could tell about that. My central thesis today, as I went crazy a little bit, was how can your center become a laboratory for learning innovation? I don't want it to be a support unit or just a service. I want it to be a laboratory, a place where ideas are tested, refined, scaled, rejected when they don't work. I hope at your campus you have the ability to fail. And I know that's a strange thing to say, but isn't it freeing to say that I could try something new, and if it doesn't work, it's okay, at least we tried? Even in financial exigency problems that we're facing at most of our campuses, it's nice to have that freedom when they say, yes, try that, Michael. If it doesn't work, the data will show us this, right? And so I wanted to ask you, what is change leadership? What best describes your campus right now? How are you feeling about your campus? Do you feel like things are mostly stable when it comes to leadership? Are you facing constant change at your school?
And I'm
Are you
sharing that poll right now, so we have people taking it in real time,
fantastic?
which is my
And
favorite part of GoToWebinar. I
me
have
too.
it's I'm seeing those bars slide up and down. It's a really cool. Reactive change and constant change seem to be neck and neck.
Interesting.
Very few people saying mostly stable, and hardly anyone saying transformational. So
Well, I mean,
it sounds like it's there's some very definite feelings around change.
well, that's true. I mean, if it was mostly stable, this would have run smoothly so far. So that's the way it goes sometimes. And being live like this, and then trying to work out the technical from you're in Florida and I'm in Missouri, even though we practiced, here we are. So
Yep.
I feel like I'm reactive today.
So I'll share the results there so
Please.
everyone can see. It's 15% mostly stable, 40% constant change,
Oh,
35% reactive change,
hmm.
10% transformational change. Can you take a moment to just say what the difference you'd say, like how you would define constant versus reactive change?
Well, when I think of constant change, at least from past discussions I've had with other directors, that they feel like they never really know from day to day the major amount of changes that are going to happen from the powers that be on their campus. Every semester seems to be different. Every approach to budgeting seems to be in flux.
Mm.
The way that they're doing that is is almost so unstable that you couldn't even say it was stable or even transformational, because you're constantly in this cycle of change and trying to reinvigorate and trying to be excited about that. When I think about reactive change, maybe this would have been something to mention earlier. When I think about reactive change, I think, is your school in such a position that it feels like you're always responding to what somebody else is telling you to do, that this reaction seems to not be rooted in data-driven experiences. Rather, it seems to be, this is a whim of the moment and you're living in it. If I were to say where my school was right now, I would say reactive.
Mm.
And part of that is, and I can unpack that even further, the university president has changed within the last year. I have a brand new provost. The associate provost to whom I report is retiring in June, and my partner in the learning center is retiring in 2 weeks. And what I'm trying to do is keep my head above water while hiring for every unit in the space. In addition, rehiring her replacement, and then, of course, training a new associate provost to assist me as we start to move forward. I feel like I haven't had a chance to be really innovative because I'm reacting to all of these changes in real time. Does that make sense? So that poll is interesting to me. So let's kind of break it down a little. What is change leadership in higher education? How am I looking at that? I really believe that in a lot of ways that most of us we're probably trained or even heard the phrase change management. And change management is really about maintaining some sort of order. You keep things stable and you minimize the disruption. So you've got this established set of guidelines. So if you were lucky enough to inherit maybe a functional, thriving, effective learning center at your institution, sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You kind of slide into this new system. You figure out as a director or the manager where you see that going. And then as a manager, when I look at a space like that, I say, okay, what can I do to predict problems and knock those barriers down before my employees get there? So you're looking at maintaining a stable, minimizing disruption, this order, right? But change leadership is very different. Change leadership aligns with the people, vision, and values that you would need for transformation. It's about aligning those people, vision, and values so that you can move forward. So what I think about when I think about moving forward is, first, my student learning outcomes. If you haven't written student learning outcomes for your various units under your purview, you probably should, because that gives you a guideline and a direction to move. Yes, even though that we've been slapped down several times in our state for the words equity and access, I still believe that that is an important part of the way a learning center operates, because you are still dealing with equity and access when it comes to distributing the services you provide, the people you are hiring, the way that you train. All of these things do matter, even if we don't purposefully always use those terminology in certain states in our union. How's that for threading the political needle on that? And then, of course, you've got to align with your institutional mission. For me, that meant being active in the conversation. I always believe you've got to be in the room where it happens, right? To quote Hamilton. So if you want to be part of the university's mission and the way that your university moves forward, you've got to be on those committees where that is discussed, and your voice has to matter. I'll give you an example from my institution currently. We are moving to R2. We have not had a research status before. This has been, Missouri State University was established as a teaching college primarily. As it has grown and changed from a Southwest Missouri State to Missouri State, the statewide mission became much more apparent. And as we've done that, we have grown so much that it was now time to start offering PhD programming and these sorts of things. When I start thinking about PhD programming and research, how does that impact our learning center? My learning center has traditionally supported all students, just like most of you. If you have a writing center, you are likely focusing on all writers across campus. My writing center even services faculty and staff. So to move to R2, I had to be in that conversation to advocate to ensure that I had the resources available to actually make that transition. So what's change leadership in this context? When I think about change leadership for our learning center, I don't mean swimming in the vortex of terror. Again, change management is when the term that most everyone is using, it's a basic set of tools or structures intended to keep things under control. And the goal is to minimize the distraction or impact. For me, change leadership is concern for the driving forces, vision, and processes that fuel large-scale transformation. It probably wouldn't surprise you to know that in this context, my learning center changes dramatically quite a bit. I am concerned a lot about the university mission, our budgets, these sorts of things. But what I really ask myself every day when I come into the office is, where are we going as a group, and how do we bring people with us? And that took a very different skill set for me. I don't know about many of you, but I was thrown into the role in a very chaotic way. To give you a little history at my school, the writing center director at the time was dismissed from the position. Since that person was tenured, they called that retreat to faculty. I guess you retreat from a faculty to a faculty line when you are dismissed from a staff line. And they did a year-long search, and they found me as a professor in reading and said, just fix this. And I had an empty room, no training materials, no really idea what I was doing, granted this budget and free reign to do whatever I wanted because it was so broken, it just didn't matter. And I had to figure out, well, what that meant for me as a leader. First, I had to hire a completely new team, and then I had to convince a university that had been burned once that, yes, this program is viable. So what I recognize for me is that change is constant. So let's get ahead of it, right? It's not an interruption. At least not the way I think about it. I think change is our baseline. We can see that change in accreditation, staffing, technology, our student demographics. But here's what I think is a key. Change in academia is negotiated. It's not mandated. Leadership happens through relationships. We could build all these beautiful systems, name these really fun things: writing consultants, supplemental instruction leaders, structured learning assistants, academic coaches. We've got all these beautiful things that are happening in our space, but it really comes down to the basic of, how are people getting along? What is the relationship between those folks? And I really think that that's the most important part, and I hope the part that you take away from today. So I think there's always room for improvement. I never want to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because what it feels like to me is that I'm just sitting there, well, maybe waiting for something to break. No matter what I build, students find a way to break it. Every system, every software program, every workshop, they always find a different way to break it. You cannot predict all of these movements. So here's an example. In his later years, Pablo Picasso was not allowed to roam an art gallery unattended. Did you know that? Because he'd previously been discovered in the act of trying to improve on his old masterpieces. So here's a masterpiece, but later in life, it looked like that. Sometimes you get a different way of looking at things, and you can't help yourself. I don't know about you. I don't think it's ever done. And I love this example because even later in life, he was always trying to improve it, because there was always room for improvement in his eyes. But improvement requires willingness to revisit what we thought was already done. The first time I talked about this with any group, the first thing that came to mind for several learning center directors, especially those who also might teach, as I do, I teach in the Honors College. In my bio, she read that I was doing a lot of publications for other companies. I run an academic journal. I speak all around the country. I do reviews of different programs. And in the end, it just seems like a lot of work. but I'm always constantly trying to make my learning center better. I never want to come in and do the same thing every day and expect it to get better. And post-COVID, I've really hit a wall. Some people I've spoken to haven't hit the same wall I have. Before COVID, I'll give you an example. Our writing center was usually what I call the canary in the coal mine. When things were good, the writing center was packed. When things were struggling, well, then we saw it there first. And in our writing center, the fall before COVID, we had grown so much that we had 5,000 unique visits that semester, just that semester, with 36 writing consultants and 6 graduate assistants, and 1 per course instructor helping me navigate this ever-changing, ever-developing space. We were working online, in person, through Zoom, through email, anything that we could do. Then COVID hit, and my president came to me, and he said, Michael, what can you do to move all the Learning Center online? I said, we're ready to go, sir. We can just tell me the word, and we'll move everything to online. He said, oh, well, here's what you're not going to like. I want you to fire all of your student employees. I'm going to give you a handful of graduate assistants that no longer have a place to go, and then you'll use them. And I said, well, when they have to be trained. They cannot just jump in. He said, well, you have a weekend. Would it surprise anyone that what that did was break our community? After somewhere close to 12 years of building that community, only to have it jerked out from under us because of a pandemic. And then a president who needed to be, a good steward of taxpayer dollars, who decided that getting rid of the student workers was the most judicious way of doing so. And all of a sudden, we struggled. Post-COVID, our numbers, we fought constantly to kind of get people to come back. By fall of 2024, the Writing Center was back to 2,800 students. And I thought, okay, we're back. And then fall of 2025, we took a 500 appointment dip. AI came in sideways on us. Change is constant, folks. And no matter how much I improved it, I cannot predict that Skynet is going to take over the way that we do writing. And I couldn't predict that a pandemic would cause my president to dismiss all of my student workers. Yet here we are. So I'm constantly now in this cycle of rebuilding. So one of the things I try to avoid is chasing trends. As the editor of the Learning Assistance Review, most of the articles that I'm receiving have been about academic coaching being a foundation for success, which I agree with. That supplemental instruction is a great way to rebuild programs, and it's a good bang for your buck because you've got large groups with well-trained leaders doing this. But what I really wanted to think about was my mission, right? Effective leaders, we know, are grounded in a mission. We talk about innovation, but flavor of the month initiatives don't matter to me. What had happened for me is that I wanted to do some creative problem solving and reflection through small experiments in my space, and then scale it up if it works. So you want to think about, as you work in your center, low risk pilots before scaling those changes. When I was running the Writing Center independently of any other learning commons, there was other tutoring centers on campus, like the math department was doing its own tutoring in a scary little basement, and they just had a bunch of graduate assistants sitting around with no training who were just said, well, I'm open, come and talk. They were doing the same thing with some low-level chemistry stuff. And then an associate provost came in and asked me if I wanted to do a supplemental instruction program. And I was excited by the idea of something new. And I said, sure, I'd be interested in that, but what is it? Because I was not familiar with the model at the time. And she said, well, don't worry about that. I've talked to several departments, and I've got 2 departments who have agreed to a pilot program for you. And I've selected 10 courses in which that you'll have this supplemental instruction program. I said, that's fantastic. Can you define what that is for me? And she said, well, I'm going to send you to the training at University of Missouri, Kansas City in January. This was late October. So she said, don't worry about that right now. I want you to start making contacts with faculty in these 10 courses. And she had chosen low-level economics and introductory math courses. I said, okay, so what do I tell the faculty? She said, well, just talk to them and say that you're going to have supplemental instruction leaders in the classroom that are going to help their students learn how to study. I said, that's fantastic. Who are those leaders? And she said, well, you'll have to hire a team before the semester starts. Unpack that for a minute. She wanted me to hire a team before I'd ever had the training, before I even knew what it was. How was I supposed to tell these students what they needed? So I started doing research as much as possible. But in the end, until you actually experience it, it's really a challenge to get that low-level, low-risk scaling to start. So I was interviewing students like, dude, I don't know exactly what it is, but it's going to be fun. Are you in? And I got 10 suckers to sign up. Then I went to training, and the first thing they told me in training was, a lot of schools have had limited success with SI and math. Of course, that was the first thing we were doing. And as you might predict, it's a numbers game. And we weren't getting the numbers that we needed. And I had to reboot the entire program the next semester so that we focused on biomedical sciences and large lecture-based courses. You get the idea. So my associate provost, while meaning well, was looking at the trend saying this is a great thing to do, but not really giving us the time to unpack that low-risk pilot. So our first semester literally crashed and burned, and I had to rethink the entire program. So let's understand some resistance to change. People don't resist change. They resist loss. And that loss usually means that staff fear losing some autonomy or stability. Let's unpack that for a minute, the autonomy part. I've been seeing this a lot at different learning centers across the country where they're losing their actual identity as a standalone unit and being absorbed into something else. I have fought for almost 20 years to keep our learning center under academic affairs and under the provost's office so that I can position myself academically. Some learning centers are under student affairs. And I see a lot of shifting and changing in that, especially when they start to move into enrollment management or when they're taken over by the library and the dean of the library suddenly becomes the de facto, administrator. And you start to lose that autonomy. And sometimes that loss also means a loss of stability. Student employees and the students who rely on you may fear new systems or expectations for the space. You've done a lot of work trying to get your space to feel welcome and open, and suddenly you've got this major shift happening. Will the students lose what they have grown to know? Faculty may also worry about those shifting roles. At my school, I made a fateful decision when they asked me, do I want to stay faculty or would I like to move to staff? And I thought that over. I wasn't sure how to respond. At the time, the reading program was actually starting to fold. We were looking, my reading program actually focused on developmental ed. The school was moving away from that. And so my dean said, look, here's 2 contracts. Choose faculty. I can't really protect you. So if the writing center somehow falters under you, the English department could always take it back and you would be without a position because you would not be on your tenure track anymore. Or you could be staff and I could protect you and let you kind of experiment and see what you can do. So obviously that staff sounded better. At my school, I wish I hadn't made that decision. My writing center did not falter. More, the English department became a vital partner, and I was able to prove its worth and value. However, I didn't have the oversight I needed in curricular change. I had to rely on others to be our advocates for that. So my voice was lost because I am on a campus where faculty voices are stronger than staff. Part of my changes in the way that I look at what I do is I try to be completely transparent with my student workers and other employees, and I communicate as early as possible with stakeholders so that any questions that they have, really, I can tackle early. So let's make this a little more real. What creates the most resistance in your center? So let's do poll number 2. What creates the most resistance in your center? Is it fear of losing control, workload increase, a lack of clarity, or a lack of trust in leadership? I suppose I could have put all of the above too, but we'll just see where those 4 get us.
So the poll is live. If you are joining us but don't have the window open, you can go into GoToWebinar now to take that poll. Let's leave it open for a few more seconds, but we are
Sure.
seeing pretty even responses
Oh,
across the board. It's interesting. So it's holding pretty steady at 66%. So I'm going to say that we're pretty much looks like we've gotten pretty much as many responses. Oh, now that's summoned more people to
okay.
respond. So right now it's at 23% fear of losing control, 25% workload increase, 20% lack of clarity, and 32% lack of trust in leadership. So let me show those so everyone can see. And yeah, interesting results.
Very much so. I'm facing a huge change in the way that we run our learning center here at Missouri State due to financial constraints and also the loss of a full-time director. Her position will be recrafted, and we're advertising it starting April 15th. Not that I'm looking for somebody who would like to be a supplemental instruction director, but I am, maybe from this audience. But when she leaves her position, all of her duties I'll absorb. So I'm getting a workload increase. Oh, and my pay isn't changing, in case you're wondering, which most of you went, yeah, we feel that. The new person then would take on the supplemental instruction role, and I would handle all of the tutoring, the research and development, the marketing.
Giving that a thumbs down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the writing center, all of our programming, our absent professor program, all of that I will be doing. And because I convinced the powers that be early on that our students were amazing and that I just needed money for infrastructure, I have never been able to leverage more positions in the space. Yes, this way lies madness at a school my size, where I have hundreds of student workers and rely on really trying to be clear and getting them to trust in my leadership. With the loss of an associate provost who was wonderful and really supportive, we have a new provost as well and a new president, and their priorities are starting to align with our move to R2 and in our additional PhD programming, where their focus is rather split. Michael has this maybe enviable, maybe unenviable position of kind of having a blank slate for fall. So the first thing I did was reimagine what our learning center does. Because the budget is likely going to be cut, I'm anticipating that in advance. We used to tutor everything, right? Student came in and said, I need help with underwater basket weaving too. Do you have a tutor for that? We would poll our current staff to see if anybody can hold their breath that long. And if they can, we pair them up and we're off. If they can't, we turn to the departments, ask for referrals, and start building that, and we're already behind. It was a mad way of doing it, but it was the way that our former provost preferred us to do it, so that we were almost everything to everyone. Now, most of you are going, oh my God, those poor people, right? And that's not a way to handle it. So what I did was propose the change is that first, our supplemental instruction program needs to grow into a structured learning assistant program. 2, we shouldn't be tutoring everything. What we need to be doing is tutoring our top 10 dynamic classes that really need our help. So I would need the data on the DFW so that we can be more proactive instead of reactive. And then 3, of course, be involved in the strategic plan that talked about our move to R2 so that I can get the resources I needed to support the writing and the graduate level work that we're supporting currently. My supplemental instruction program currently supports 4 different graduate level courses in 4 different departments, which is, I'm heard, is kind of unusual because we have SI leaders within like our occupational therapy program. But it seems to work here well. And so I needed to communicate a major change to all of our current student workers. I'm in the process of doing that right now by holding 4 different informational meetings for those returning and being clear and upfront. This is what's happening. If you are an appointment-based tutor and you're not tutoring these 10 classes, we'll have to part ways. But if you can support those 10 classes, let's talk. Let's add you to that list. Let's make this dynamic. My idea was to actually shrink my footprint a little bit as we move into this new era, not only to make it manageable for me, but to also be more pointed in our messaging to the campus community to ensure success. So the start was, let's start with who's coming back, my students. And then as we hire, we start building on that trust. And that in the fall, I'll have a big rollout of a brand new Bear Claw with a new idea. So as I built on this, I had to think about and this is where the theory part comes in, right? We'll talk a little bit about the Kubler-Ross model. Okay, Kubler-Ross model postulates a progression of emotional states of grief. So the denial, anger, depression, bargaining, acceptance, most of us have heard this before. There are many models out there, other frameworks. They're useful, but they're not always doing the work, right? The work is really about people, and people are absolutely resistant to a lot of this change. Kubler-Ross noted later in life that the stages are not linear and predictable progression, and that she regretted writing them in a way that was misunderstood, because you don't always go straight from denial to anger to depression to bargaining acceptance. It's not like that. Maybe you start out with depression. Um, I look at it kind of like this loss of support can really overwhelm some. So when I started thinking about our new structure, what do most of our students truly need? Many of our students come in, they're not even sure what a learning center does. No matter how much marketing, no matter how much goodwill we have with faculty, in the end, the student is stuck with their own belief system or what we're posting online or whatever. And I theorize that many of our students coming in don't know how to study, which most of you would say the same. And that leaning on our academic coaches as our beginning of this process makes the most sense. I do not control, though, our academic coaches. Our academic coaches come out of our first year programs office because they got a nice big fat grant a few years back. So all of my coaching was dissolved in the Learning Center and moved over to them. They ran that grant to the end, and now they have 2 full-time folks that do that and a couple graduate assistants. I'm going to lean on their goodwill and say the students who are in these outlier classes, because everybody has that class, the one that beats them up, it's likely because they're having a problem navigating their textbooks or time management or talking to faculty. And these are something that are better suited for your academic coaches. So if we can send those there, we could save our money for the classes that I know really need my help. So to kind of short circuit some of this, for the denial part, I want to keep the message clear and values driven. What are my values here at Missouri State? Well, I tell my students when I hire them, their job is deceptively simple in statement, but hard to execute. And that is, I want them to try to save one person this semester. You save more than that, gravy. One person from dropping out, one person from giving up on this class. I want you to have one breakthrough per hour with that person. Again, another low bar. So if you're in a writing consultation, I really want that student to have that light bulb moment. Find those. But I've also had some anger. When I have presented this presentation to others saying, this is what our new learning center will look like, I've had a tutor get angry with me because she was likely going to be moving out of her position. And I listen with empathy. I want to understand where they're coming from. She loves the job. She loves what she does, but she's not getting anybody coming in. We were trying to be everything to everyone, and that was a huge mistake. When a faculty member called us and said, hi, I have 6 fantastic students who would make great tutors for your art history class. My partner hired all 6. They've had 1 appointment all semester. It's a waste of time and resources. I can't really say that to that poor student worker, but what I can say is, hey, if you love tutoring, here are 10 other opportunities for classes we want to support in the fall. Would this be something you're interested in? Or are you a good writer? We have openings in the Writing Center. Let's talk. I always want to stay focused on our student outcomes too, and that's where I really have to bargain with faculty a lot. My job does tend to be a lot of faculty front-facing, shaking hands, kissing babies kind of thing. And so when I rebuilt my center from scratch, and again, what I do every semester now is I buy lots of swag, lots of fun stuff, and then faculty who tend to refer us a lot, they get the swag, of course, and I do visits to their office hours. But those who might be our detractors, I also try to get on our side. So I will also visit their office hours. I used to call those drive-bys, but that's probably not the best phrasing to use. But I would stop by their office and thank them for recommending the center, talk about their problems and concerns, and see what we can do to help. Faculty were often shocked that I was saying, I want to focus on you for a minute. What do you need? And how can we then help your students meet the outcomes that you're expecting? At the same time, here are our outcomes. Where can we align? When it comes to the depression in the space, and I think there's a lot of depression just in general on our campus right now, a lot of uncertainty with new leadership, lots of uncertainty with the change to R2, the budget looming, what's going to happen when the governor comes in and starts cutting, we need to celebrate our small wins. And I think for me, this is where I'm not great. And that's where my students really help me. Celebrating the tutor of the week, or the month, or the semester, or the year, celebrating those great reviews that we get online from our track cloud system that says, Sarah really saved me, or I love Susie, or whatever. And just really letting the students know that these were little wins that I wanted to see. I was so bad at that when I first started thinking about our space because I was so focused on the system, I started to lose my idea of what the people behind it were feeling. So that acceptance, empowering your champions, and sharing the success stories now becomes part of the fabric of my everyday life. Like, this is what we do. We are our people. That is who we are. That is what we need to be. I don't like saying, look, we're all the big family, because that's like the most overused cliche phrase ever. But I do want to empower our champions to really share what they do with others. So we started levels of management in our space as time has gone on, master tutoring, group leaders for supplemental instruction, etc. What I want is that our progress feels like loss before it feels like improvement, right? And in this case, with me shrinking my footprint and refocusing our efforts, it does feel like a loss. It feels like I'm retreating a little ways to sub. And that was one SI leader's argument to me, was that, if you're shrinking, aren't you retreating? No, I'm also being strategic with our money. If I have a leaner, stronger team, do more, everyone's going to get the hours they want, and we'll start to rebuild our community again. The part I miss the most, watching our numbers dwindle because we were just staying the course, isn't a way to survive in an environment where budgets are cut or AI is coming at you sideways, right? So why do people resist change? Dave Kubler-Ross says they perceive each break with the past as like a little death. That's horrible. And leaders like us who attempt to ignore the need for healing that must occur during the change process run the risk of deepening resistance to the new vision, undermining that entire process. So in my meetings with these students, I understand that there's some loss. It's the same thing that's happening with my associate provost leaving. She came on during COVID. So we didn't meet in person. We all met on Zoom. And when we first saw each other 18 months after she started in person, it was an interesting way that she approached building the team back up. Because we'd all been so isolated, now to have the team together, she started to challenge us to think about where our units intersected instead of siloing so much, because we'd been siloed online. Well, now let's start leaning on each other's strengths. What can we do to help? What I liked about her leadership style was that She knew the barriers I was facing before I got there and tried to knock them down as best she could before I hit. She also allowed me to experiment with change. Um, I wanted to experiment with the public speaking center. I've wanted one since I started the program. I didn't have the money. During COVID, suddenly we had the money to start trying it, and it was a disaster. No one sent us videos. No one was really using it. And it's still taken a while for it to catch fire. But once it does catch fire, I felt like I was confident it was going to work. But here at Missouri State, that just hasn't happened for us. I had to let the program go. And it felt like a loss to me. And she said, no, it wasn't. You tried. You gave it your best. Did you actually do all the things that you would know to do to build a program to make it make sense? I said, yes. But when you also think about your learning center being part of the culture of your campus community, maybe it just wasn't right for us. Okay. There are other change management models, the Kruger model. It says change is like an iceberg. It's a phenomenon for which most of the danger lies beneath the surface. So as I'm meeting with my student groups within the Learning Center saying, this is the change we're going to go through in the fall, trying to figure out what I'm missing. What are their perceptions? I wanted to get ahead of this. I didn't want them to hear about it secondhand. I wanted to hear about it from me. It's a little messy right now. It's a little chaotic, but I know I have a vision and I want their feedback because their feedback matters to me. Am I cutting something I shouldn't? Am I moving in a direction you're not comfortable with? Is there something that you see on the front lines that I, sitting in my office, do not? And so I wanted to have that larger, longer conversation with that group. And it's been working. So far, the students have been extremely receptive to the change because they see the passion that I've put into it. It's kind of like going to your favorite class. Your favorite class isn't always your favorite subject. Something about that teacher drawing you in, right? I'll give you a good example. My son, when he started school here, he was a criminology major, and he wasn't very excited about his classes. And then one day he comes to my office door and he's like, Dad, chemistry is the building blocks of all life. I said, no, that's biology. He goes, shut up. And he sits down and he starts talking. And he's really excited about this chemistry class he's in because this professor had made it feel real and applicable and something he could think about every day. He is now a chemist at 3M, thanks to him. This professor changed his trajectory in one day because of the excitement, the way that he poured into it, the feeling that he had about what he was teaching. So I'm trying to emulate that idea within the Learning Center, saying this is a good change for us. This is the way we need to move. There's some other change management models. The Cotter model of change management means that successful change processes is having 8 significant steps. The goal provides a consistent level of emphasis on the process regardless of how long it takes. And so you'll notice that creating the climate for change means that you have to have an increased urgency, build the guiding team, and get the right vision. So for me, the increased urgency on our campus is that budget's going to change. It's going to retract. I need to be ready. I'm losing a full-time person. I don't know when the new person might start, and that person has a niche job. So I have to increase the urgency for this change because I need to survive. Plus, I'm on a ticking clock. I need to hire everybody before they leave for the summer because it becomes really problematic for my administrative assistant then to do all the paperwork necessary before they even get started if we're doing it when they return in August. I need to build the guiding team. So those students who are returning need to feel investment in it. I want them to feel part of it. My graduate assistants are wonderful resources here where they're helping me with hiring. They're doing a lot of administrative tasks that I never allowed them to do before because I liked to meet everyone who came through the door. Now I can't. So I'm relying on my already established team to take ownership in that. And then that vision, getting that right vision was the key. Now for me, I really started there. It's like, what do I see our center looking like? And then how does that vision change as the students impact it? So this is kind of the way I looked at Cotter's 8 steps of change, that creating the climate for change is something I'm always doing. I'm always in the urge that's saying, look, there is an urgency. A student needs our help. But there are also no emergencies in tutoring. Students also have to know when to step up because they are adults, and I cannot step up for them. So remember this, that people don't fear change, they fear loss. So giving them something to invest in, giving them a model, a vision, a way forward helps mitigate some of that. So part 2, I want to talk about planning for change in your learning center. And that planning for change is that really the key for me is that nobody can effectively lead without it. But most planning ignores culture and capacity, and that's why it fails. Success really does come when you involve everyone. I'm notorious for just doing the job myself. You know, I've edited a journal for 14 years now, and my staff have ebbed and flowed with the workload. It went from one issue a year to now quarterly, plus a special issue over the summer. And that's a lot of editing. That's a lot of layout and design. And, you know, as it's grown and evolved, I usually had to take on most of the role myself, except for my editorial team that's making the decisions. You know, I'm doing all of the grunt work. Now relying on more and more of that team as my trust is built has made me feel a little better and give me a better balance in my life. But changes connect to learning and belonging with that. And so when I think about making them feel invested in the program, I wanted them to have a say in what happens with every issue. The same thing in my space. For everything from the way the furniture is laid out, the colors we choose, the swag I get my students to weigh in. And because teams own that process, it makes it easier. So most of you know this, but higher ed versus business, they're different, right? Except we're starting to see that move closer and closer together, aren't we? Business change is usually hierarchical, ROI driven, and short term. On higher ed, it's distributed, mission driven, long term, and often slow. But learning centers can't afford to be slow when it comes to change. They've got to start being a little more proactive, I think. I know that leaders succeed better through collaboration, not command. I could have made the decisions all on my own. And in most cases, I make a decision and then I hope that I can convince the team to come along with me. But in the end, I want my team to realize that if they don't like it, they can speak up. They can tell me what's going on. From the brand new person on the team all the way up to my experienced folks, to my full-time people, I want them to be able to come to me and say, you know, Michael, dang it, you're just not seeing the forest for the trees. Let's talk a little bit more about this and make that work. And I like that idea. I like the idea that I'm not the only one dealing with it. So I rethought my strategic plan. The thicker the plan, the less effective it will be. I don't know about you, but somebody hands me a stack full of papers to study, I'm going to go watch The Voice or whatever. And I'll just kind of glance at it. What I want is quick, clean, keep it strategic and simple. The KISS method, better than keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple and strategic seems to work better for me. But the plans fail because they're too generic, there's too many goals, and there's no way to follow through. So a better approach has always been start small, act fast, learn continuously. So ask yourself, what do you do best? What evidence do you have that supports that? And then how can you amplify it? That's the way I kind of think about my strategic planning from the Learning Center. So let's do poll number 3, rethinking your strategic planning. Be honest. How would you describe your current strategic plan? It's too long to use, it's outdated, you use it actively, or you don't really have
A lot of we don't really have one.
Oh, no.
Over 50%.
Wow.
Sliding a little bit back and forth, but it's over half the responses are that one. And it's possible, you know, when I worked in higher ed, I know I was sometimes low enough on the totem pole that I didn't know about the strategic plans of the larger school, and I was newer in my career, so I didn't necessarily know to ask about it.
Ah,
So I don't know, but I'm seeing, let me go ahead and share the results. 9% say too long to use, 6% say outdated, 33% say actively used, so that's good.
yay.
That's the second highest. 52% we don't really have one.
Mm, Yeah. Um, my strategic plan mirrors the strategic plan of the institution. And the way that I got onto that strategic planning committee is that I bugged people until I did. um, I didn't have time for it. I still don't have time for it, but I go anyway. And occasionally I get sucked into these meetings that take all day long, and I have to restructure my entire week around it. This Friday, for instance, it is happening that way, where yesterday I received a message that said, Michael, we hope that you'll be here 8 to 4 on Friday, when I had a bunch of interviews and other meetings planned for my team. So I had to move things around. So you don't really
Eight
have
to
one.
four?
What's that?
8 to 4?
Yes, ma'am. But they are feeding
Oh,
us. Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot, especially on a Friday. And for those of you that don't know me, my day is a lot of it. Well, I start early. I'm up at 4:30 every day, and I come in my office by 6, and then I write for 2 to 3 hours every day. It helps me not only kind of plan the idea of what's happening that week, but also that writing translates into publications. I'm working on an article, writing for 4 different newsletters across campus. In addition, I'm helping with the layout and design of the Learning Systems Review, serving as the editor there, writing 3 contracts for my publishing company right now. And so all of these things become part of the fabric of who I am and the rhythm of my day. But that writing strategy for me has really worked out over the years as I start to think about strategic planning, in that, what does it look like? Where am I in my process? So I'm always actively using my plan, but it's really short. I mean, my plan usually is just a few succinct bullet points to move forward. I used to have this gigantic plan that I just didn't use. And so when I started tying it into the university strategic plan, I started to pull out the planks from the strategic plan that referred to student success, and then looked at those initiatives to see where the Learning Center could come in. Are we specifically mentioned? If we're not, why not? How can I get mentioned? Where can I be intrusive? I want everyone in administration, every faculty member, every student on this campus to get sick and tired of hearing my name, because I need to be front and center. For my plan to work, I had to actively use it and tie it into what the university's doing. So I always thought about it as culture before outcomes. If you want to improve the outcomes, you got to improve the culture first. Culture drives your success, not the policies. I can create all kinds of policies all day long, but if the students aren't excited to be here, they're not going to come in. So I always want to model curiosity, transparency, and collaboration. So when I am working with my team and they're giving me great ideas, I am then taking those to the advisory councils that I have set up for every area. My Writing Center Advisory Council has 14 active faculty members. They are extremely active in giving me advice and support. The math drop-in table has 6. The science drop-in table has 6. And these are from various units we support. In addition to that, I attend many of the dean's team meetings. For my associate provost, I've also pinch hit for her at associate provost level committees. And I'm always advocating for what my teams are doing and then bringing back their ideas to them and creating this giant stew that everyone can be part of. And I try to recognize the effort and experiment as much as possible. But really, what I want to build is a psychological safety for innovation. I want my student workers to go, dude, I got this great idea. And if we've tried it before, well, we can unpack that together. But if we haven't tried it before, let's try it and see what happens. I'm always surprised that the students come up with so much better and more innovative ideas than I can, being old and outdated sometimes, I feel. And it makes me crazy. But I want to be as transparent as possible with them as I'm working on it. So let's give you a 5-minute plan. So the why. How does your plan support learning and equity? First thing I ask myself. The second, the vision. What will success look like if the plan works? 3, my drivers. Who are my allies on campus? Who can I rely on? That one's a hard one to figure out. I mean, you've got your champions, I'm sure, but are a lot of you active in that community and relationship building, getting out of your office and walking across campus and shaking babies and kissing hands and all that? You get the idea, right? You've got to be out there. I'll give you a really fun example. there was a group of ex-deans, deans who have dropped from their positions and now went back to faculty or staff positions, and they met once a month for lunch. I had been working with a faculty member in math to kind of improve the way that we were doing math tutoring. And he said, you should come to this meeting because it's really interesting. And every month they would gather at a different location, and they would gossip a lot about the changes that were happening in their departments. And I was learning so much from that because then I could see some of the pitfalls and concerns they were having and lend assistance where necessary. That built so many coalitions, and all it was lunch. Impact. How will you measure any growth of the change plan that you've done? Then you have your advocates who will champion and sustain that work. And then, of course, clarity and communication are stronger than control. So those 5 points are the things that I think about when I think of a 5-minute plan, because clarity will beat that control every single time. But because you have a plan, you got to figure out how to make those changes stick. How we've done it here is that I celebrate short-term wins and share that widely. Any chance I get, I'm going to try to share that, whether it's just with the faculty members who are really leaning into our supplemental instruction program, or maybe our writing fellows program where we're working with a department on improving writing in this unit. What are some of the successes students are telling us? I also share our retention rates that are direct correlations and these sorts of things with them. You get the idea. Share stories linking change to student impact. Storytelling, it should be part of your day. You should be a storyteller. The story of your learning center is the story of the students who walk through that door and have that breakthrough moment. Those really feel good moments. Review that, refine it, and repeat. Make team reflection part of the norm. So every meeting that we have with our groups, we reflect on the successes and failures. I try to do meetings with each student group. Usually the newbies get me every 2 weeks. The experienced folks can come when they like. We used to have a course that was designed for our tutors to take so that the more you took it, the more you moved up. The biggest problem is that the provost office was paying for that, and they have decided to stop paying for that. So they would force students to enroll in a course and pay for it themselves while working for me. So I dropped that model, and I'm in the process of rethinking how we do that. And I need to have the time for the reflection. In the class, it was built in. Now I've got to have them gather in small groups, feed them a little. So it's costing me a little more money, but in the end, it's really making my team stronger. I want change that lasts, right? And I want it to become the culture again. And I think that's what made our learning center successful the first time, is that it was fun to work in the center. It was a privilege to be a tutor. And we were overflowing with applications. After COVID, applications were hard to get. We were having a hard time finding the right student for the job. So I changed my messaging this year, where I was having maybe 5 or 6 applications for a certain unit. Now I was seeing 100 or more. The Writing Center had 83 applications for 6 positions. The front desk had 3 positions. We had 112 people apply. What I did was I reframed our messaging to make the Learning Center feel like the place to be on campus. We are the central location. We are the living room. Come join us for fun. And part of the plan was at the beginning of the semester, we won't open the first week. We'll have bear claws we'll give away and goodies we'll give away, and we'll have a party-like atmosphere. And then we traditionally closed at the last day of classes. And then finals week, the space opened up for study. What I'm going to do this year is open it up with a partnership with a library. We're going to bring popcorn in and movies and games, and the space can be a place to relax and have fun and just be between those stressful classes that you've been studying for all semester, to make it a little more inviting. And I don't have the money to do all that, but the library had some, and some of the departments had some, and they loved the idea, and they loved the idea that their students could be involved in it. So they're all helping me pitch in. It choked me up a little bit when I started to get yeses from everybody. I'm excited about what fall will look like. Remember that change must fit the campus culture. So when I think about that, why? At the outset, you need to be clear about why you're introducing change and not introducing change for change sake. And we're going to send you this PowerPoint, but I have a tool that you can do that with, something you can play with online. The vision, one of the key concepts in leadership and management of change is vision. Hence, prior to implementing any change, a leader must articulate a clear vision for the school, for the department, for your unit, for this one particular area. The drivers. The next step is to ensure the right drivers, your people and teams, are in place to drive that change. Teams need careful consideration setting up to ensure their effectiveness. Their impact. How will you measure that? You need that data on the back end, otherwise you're not getting any more money. And then your advocates. Blanchard et al. 2009 state that sponsorship or activity for change from senior leaders will help to gain commitment and buy-in for the change process. Who's going to back you? Can you see the vision and possible outcome to the work for them? My provost said, "You are a woo on your scale, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am." And I didn't know why, because I used to be super shy, but when it's something I love, I am going to work at this and sell it. And she goes, "I can see that in you." Of course, my first 2 degrees, I have a bachelor's and master's in theater performance, was a professional actor for a decade. So she also says, "You can fake it till you make it." I said, "Sometimes true, but I think students see right through that." And I needed her to be my first advocate on my vision for success, and she was all in. Now I have to prove it. So let's do poll number 4. Poll number 4. And poll number 4 talks about what's one thing you're most likely to change when you go back to your center. What's one thing you're most likely to change when you go back to your center? Is it communication, staff involvement, your planning processes, or your assessment impact tracking? And I'm not proposing you try to do all these at once. If you don't have a plan, 52% of you, take little bites. Do yourself a favor. I like to start with the communication. That's the way I usually do it. Data and assessment early on for me was rather weak. And I think part of that was because I was alone when I first started all these programs with just student employees. And I wasn't sure how to collect some of that data. And as time went on and our data collection got better through like Track Cloud and other things, I was able to tie into Banner, get more robust data. That more robust data led to me getting better retention data. And I was able to then link into the master plan, but that took a long time. Communication, staff involvement were usually my low-hanging fruit and the way I started. If you recall my story, I started with a writing center that was broken and there was a bad taste in people's mouths. I had to reform the vision of what that space would look like. I had to communicate my new vision. And then I had to get involvement. I can tell you that my work with faculty has been successful to the point that 75% of the people who walk through my door. How's our poll going?
Oh, it's good. I share the results. Let me show that again. So let's see. What's one thing you're most likely share again? So it looks like it's honestly pretty even across the board, but it edges out for assessment and impact tracking and planning process a little more than communication and staff involvement.
Right.
So that's very interesting results.
I think so. And I think I have several colleagues in ICLCA who would agree with them. You can't really tell a good story without your good assessment and impact tracking, right? But if you've got a new initiative with no data, you start with the communication, or you're pulling data from other schools that said this was successful, so you're looking at your benchmark institutions. There's so many ways to approach that. So I totally get that response. That makes sense to me. So here are some final thoughts to leave you with. For me, change begins with students in my center. Sustainable change would be purposeful and driven by a clear why, inclusive, co-created with my stakeholders, data informed, I want it measurable and improvable, and moral, rooted in access and learning, so that I can improve how students learn or belong. That's a lot to unpack in our time together. So I know that now that we are at the end, we like to do some, sharing of information together. So I am going to stop my share and just talk to you guys. What questions do they have?
So I'm not seeing any questions quite yet in the questions box, so I'll give folks a couple seconds to do that if you have any questions or any comments you'd like to make.
And it is possible they don't think of any at this point.
It is.
Especially if you're eating.
Sherry would like you to share your email address again.
Sure. And we can put this in, I can put that in the question box, can't I?
I don't think they will see it. Put it in the chat and address it to everyone.
I see. That's a good way to do it.
While you're doing that, we do have another question.
Okay.
What is the current staffing levels at MSU for the bear clause, such as the number of tutors and writing assistants?
Fantastic. So we have, trying to think of my numbers, currently at the writing center, we had, at our height, we had 36 consultants. I'm now down to about 2 dozen. I have 6 graduate assistants. We have a graduate assistant for math, graduate assistant for science. The math table has somewhere around 14. The science table has 17. The subject area tutoring, which was appointment based, 80. We got a small army there. Supplemental instruction has the one that's been taking the weirdest hit. Over the years, at our height, I probably had 120 SI leaders, but it never had its own budget. So now that they have moved our budget to such a way where they have to buy the leaders, and I train them and supervise them. So departments have to have a stake in it. So you can imagine that didn't go well, and that was a hard change for them to adjust to. We ended up with I'm looking at my number now. We're at 32 of those. And then for presentation center, I have 6. And then academic coaching, even though we aren't really running it, we have 4 in the background. And for some reason, I cannot share with everyone.
Okay, I will share it with everyone after I ask this next question that just came up. Any suggestions for not taking things personally when you're not involved in changes that affect you? You spoke of inviting yourself into committees, etc., but what if that's not an option?
2 different questions, kind of, in a way, right? Like, how do you not take things personal? I don't know.
It's hard.
It is. If you've got an advisory council, which I highly recommend you do, for any of your units. Like yesterday, we met for the Writing Center Advisory Council, and I have made myself ex officio. I will not vote. I am not the chair. I do not drive the agenda. I will come and answer questions, but most of the time I will just shut my mouth. And yesterday, I posed the question to the chair, who actually is the director of composition on our campus. And I said, I would like them to help me unpack emerging technologies and how we can use generative text to teach students rather than them stealing it and using it as final product. And of course, that's a hot button issue because professors wanted to say, well, if you talk about the words AI, it's really misnomed and this is this. And then somebody yelled at me about killing Amazon. And I mean, I get the ethical and moral complications of using AI, but I did say it's here. What do we do about it? Because it is impacting the center. And one of the professors was really angry at me for even posing it, because how dare I get into that? And I said, look, I understand. Thank you. I really appreciate the feedback, because if he's feeling that way and he felt comfortable enough to do that, I took that as a win. He felt comfortable enough to get angry, to really show his passion. And then I took that information to my team. I said, as we start thinking about AI in the fall, here's the words of this professor. And they're like, weren't you mad at him? I'm like, why? It was a gift, like any review.
What was he mad about? Like he didn't want to
He thinks that we should be shying away from it. We should not in any way even broach the subject in the center.
Well, then you're just going to leave the students to go crazy with it, and you
right.
have no guidelines.
Right. And, you've got workplace preparedness. Are they using it in the workplace? And are our students using it already? My polls showed that they were. But that really, to be honest, when I think about, how do you handle that, not taking it personal, I guess because I was a professional actor and I've been a creative writer for so
Yeah.
long, and that rejection is just part of the game. And I
Yeah.
always look at each rejection as a learning process. And not getting onto committees, though, is another challenge. And I get that. Um, I told my associate provost when she started that I needed her help to get me in the room where it happens. I said, I don't have the voice at Curriculum Matters because I'm not faculty any longer. I need you to be my voice sometimes, but sometimes I need to advocate for myself and my unit. So how can I do that? How can you get me in the door? And she was receptive to that idea because I made a good point to her. She is the only faculty member in our student success unit. So how in the world can she be everywhere at once? She can't. Do you
Hmm.
trust me or do you not? All right. And I managed to get in the door. When you can't be on that in that room, you've got to find your advocates to speak for you. And that's why, again, I use advisory councils. Like I can't go to every math department meeting, but 6
Right.
math professors in there who can.
Yeah. All right.
Great
We have a
question.
Yeah, we have a few more, and I know we're kind of almost at the end of the 90 minutes. So this next one is due to AI, we have lost significant student engagement in learning support. Sounds like a very common thing. We have also seen a decrease in essay drop-off rates. We aren't sure how to navigate this storm. Do you have any advice on how to tell a story to upper management?
Tell a story about the loss.
Yeah, like how I guess like how to tell a story about its impact on both the center and the students who are deciding that they don't need the service anymore.
Right. And that's what I made that assumption first that, oh, it's AI coming in sideways on us. So then I did a poll. And how I got student, for those of you that run polls, you probably all of you do it, where you had a session in your space and then the system auto generates a poll and your return is dismal. So what I did was I said, okay, I'm gonna spend $100. I'm gonna get 4 $25 gift cards to the bookstore and I'm gonna advertise my new poll. And in my new poll, I said, 4 people who answer this poll will win a drawing for $25. And suddenly I had this huge response. The stupid part was they didn't even come and pick them up. They're still sitting at my desk, but they responded. And I was able then to bring that data as part of my story and saying, look, our students are telling me they're using AI. And they even know which ones they're using. And here they are. There's a lot of different uses across campus. But I was also trying to convince them, look, AI has been built into everything that we've been doing since you opened Word.
Hmm.
And then the Grammarly that they were looking into, well, that's moving that way. And then all of a sudden we've got ChatGPT that can generate in minutes. So I wanted to tell that story by having that data. So
Hmm.
once I got more robust data, I was able to show them the pretty pictures and graphs and charts. But then I also had a spot where they could give me a narrative about it. How are
Hmm.
you using it? Why are you using it? And I used the students' words, not just mine. And that was part of it. Another part of it was I ran an issue of the Learning Assistance Review last summer, and you can find this on the ICLCA website, special issue on AI. How are other learning centers tackling AI? And I asked for just narratives. I didn't care if it was research or not. How are you doing it? What are you doing? Send it in to teach others. Great response. So we're doing it again this summer because
Awesome.
now that it's grown and changed and become its own thing, what would that look like? But for me, that story started with the data and the people just telling me what they're seeing. And also, your tutors will give you a lot of insight too. I know that when you were probably earlier, before AI, a lot of
Hmm.
people were using Kahoot and things like that, and they
Spark
were on
notes.
Khan Academy. These were some of the things that were the placeholders for that.
Hmm.
And now you're getting this, which is faster and more. I'm not saying reliable, but it was definitely more accessible.
Yeah.
And so part of the story that we've been sharing, like on our social media for our pages, we've been sharing when AI has been like drastically wrong and
Hmm.
sending those screenshots out saying, you want to help unpacking this? Come see us.
Right.
Just that simple message seemed to help. It still hasn't turned the numbers around. Still seeing a downward trend. But I think if we lean heavier into, look, it's just a tool. Let's show you how. We might be in better shape. I don't know. We're going to try. I wish there was
Yeah.
a better answer for you.
Yeah. Um, eh, we have a couple more questions. Let's see. When multiple units across campus have agendas for your work or department, what's the best way to differentiate advocates from stakeholders or risky alliances?
Can you restate that one more time just so that I'm
Sure,
clear?
sure. When multiple units across campus have agendas for your work or department, work/department, what's the best way to differentiate advocates from stakeholders or risky alliances? Risky alliances makes it sound so Game of Thrones.
I know, I love it. Actually, I absolutely love it. I wouldn't use that in the report to my provost, but I absolutely adore it. I think it's great. Risky alliances is something that I think we've lived with for a while here too. Um, I'll give you my, I think I'll give you my supplemental instruction program example as a way that I navigated it. So early on, we partnered with the department, economics, and the professor was all in, right? And he wanted to be part of it. And I thought, here's an advocate for me. He wants this 100 level course to be fully supported, and he is so on board. And then he started to try to short circuit the model every chance we got. I want to force him to come. Please don't do that. I want to give him full credit. No, stop it. I want to use my leader to grade. Please don't, right? And so in the end, when we got the data back at the end of the semester, I was not surprised to see that the students who went to supplemental instruction did worse than the students who did not. And the interesting part was in the course reviews, the students said they liked the leader better than the teacher. He was angry, very angry. In fact, he called me on the carpet in the provost's office for arbitration. And when he said, they like your SI leader better than me, I said, well, you hired them. And he refused to believe that. And so, how to differentiate? That's a challenging call. He had an agenda that he wanted to fulfill. I had the agenda of this is a pilot. Let's get through this and do this the right way. And somewhere in the middle, we came to that. And what I had to do was figure out a way to meet him somewhere halfway. I didn't want to lose an entire department. So I said, what would you rather see? If you don't like supplemental instruction leaders, and that's when he interrupted me and actually said this, you hired a spy in my classroom. Yeah. So
How did you
what
keep
I
a
did was
straight face?
I was like, well, maybe you should reflect on that. And so what I did was I created a center in our space just for economics for drop-in models that I let him have stakeholder in it. So he helped me with training. So my detractor became an ally. I did the same thing in the writing center when a faculty member wanted us to fix all the grammar. I let her see what that was like on the ground. I put her on my team. Anything that I could do to kind of turn that around was important, but it takes time.
Yeah,
How to see it, sometimes you don't see it coming.
yeah,
And so what I've normally done was relied a lot on these advisory councils to help me find those places to go. And I always tell them, we're not all going to get along and we're not always going to agree on this, but I know the models, you know the material. Together we make it work. And so show me
yeah,
what I'm missing.
yeah. I think we have time for one more question,
Okay.
and this looks like the last one we have so far. There was a comment about from one school. One person said we have data. What we are struggling is that the university is thinking about using chatbot tutors. We were trying to
Oh.
enforce that while AI tutors are great, they do not actively provide the Socratic questioning that tutoring brings. And
Garbage in,
as a
garbage
former
out.
writing tutor, I think that's a really
Yeah,
important
yeah.
distinction.
Well, garbage in, garbage out, right? The student
Yeah.
doesn't know what questions to ask. The chatbot's not going to give you the question that you need to ask. So
Mm-hmm.
you're short circuiting the learning. In the writing center, we were grappling with this idea like, if we've got generative text, what do we do with it, right? We don't want it as final product. It's terrible. And if I have to see another M dash in my life, I may scream. So what do we do, right? We can use it for planning. And I think when I think about the way AI is being used, many students are using it as a shortcut, but it's short-circuiting metacognition.
Yeah.
And I want to be clear with my administration that this is a tool in the toolbox, but it is not a relationship. You can't date
Yeah.
your chatbot. Let's stop. course, I don't want them
Not
dating
yet.
my tutors either. You got the point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I want a real authentic relationship. That's what
Mhm.
builds connection to the institution. And if they feel connected, they'll stay.
Yes.
Yeah.
One last question, it looks like. So let's see. Oops, I accidentally clicked out of that. And this one gets to me because I had the same reaction. How did you feel when you were told you had to let go of your student staff and bring on GAs? What was the reaction of the student staff? What was your message to them? Did other opportunities open for them elsewhere on campus? So I think we just want to know that they're okay.
So I fought the president. I said, I said, first I said, can I call you back? He said, absolutely, take your time.
Oh,
I spent a half hour and I screamed at the gods. And then I called him back and I said, can we negotiate this? And he said, no. I said, you realize that some of these students are relying on this to pay tuition, buy books, feed themselves, clothe themselves. There's much problem that I do. At first, I could have easily thrown him under the bus, right?
hmm
I said, President Smart made me do this.
hmm
That's a terrible way to do it because it didn't show support for what he was going through. And he was remorseful, but at the same time, he was also firm. He was not going to budge from his position. Michael, we have graduate assistants not doing anything now because the faculty have to do something and they've taken on these roles. So you need to do something with them. And yours is the most logical place to put them. So when I broke it to the student staff, I said, I will do my best to bring you back at the rate you were making or higher as quickly as I can. And I will stay in contact with you as much as possible and support you in any way I can. So when students expressed dismay and concern about food insecurity or things like that, we did have places to turn on campus. They just didn't know about it. So I became that support for them. Sometimes they just called me and just talked for hours about how sad they were to leave the job. But there was nothing I can do in the end. And I had to make it not better for them. I just had to bring them to empathy and understanding on it.
Yeah.
How are they doing now? I was able to bring most of my staff back within 6 months. So it
Oh,
was
that's
really a semester stop out.
hmm
Um, those who graduated, of course, graduated and that moved on. But for the rest of them, I was able to bring them back quickly because he recognized that my numbers were dismal and that my results were poor, that I just wasn't getting the data. When I shared him the first round of data, I said, look at the attendance and look at the satisfaction rates. We went from a 96% satisfaction rate of being extremely professional to like half that. I said, we've got to fix this. So having the data did help me in the long run.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, but you brought up a sore spot because
It's
for me
a
too.
it's
I
it's
still think
a it's
about
a
this.
it's an emotional moment to end on, but I'm glad that we found out the
You're right,
result.
because of the change leadership, that's
Yeah.
part of it, right?
hmm
You can't anticipate everything. And
Right.
so have a little grace for yourself too.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Michael. This has been amazing. We're getting some great thanks in the questions as well in the comments. We are again going to be releasing this recording in the next few days. And thank you all for coming, and hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, folks. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.